Hi, everybody. Oh, you got so quiet when I came out. I like when we yell in this library. We don't get to do that very often. How's everyone doing tonight? A little warmer today, right? Balmy. I don't know. I'll take it. I'll take balmy. My name is Aidan Flax-Clark. I'm the director of Live from NYPL, and I am thrilled that you all came out on this balmy evening. Very adventurous. Tonight we are going to learn about a singularly strange and remarkable American charismatic leader named the Public Universal Friend. They are the subject of a new book called Not Your Founding Father, which was written by tonight's guest, Nina Sankovitch. Hopefully you saw it for sale outside, yes, and maybe even some of you purchased copies of it. All right. Well, it's not your last chance. You can purchase it afterward as well, and I believe that, actually I didn't ask, but I believe that Nina is signing copies of the book afterward. Suzanne, is Nina signing copies of the book afterward? She is signing copies of the book afterward, right up here on this stage. And of course, I won't even ask, but I'm sure all of you have a library card. It would be insane to come here without a library card. You could use it to check out the book as well. So in 1776, a 23-year-old woman named Jemima Wilkinson suffered a severe illness, declared her past self dead, and then rebranded as the Public Universal Friend, a genderless messenger of God. In a few short years, the Friend preached across the Northeast and attracted a devoted band of followers known as the Society of Universal Friends. And what happened next, you're going to find out in a minute. But I mention that because, speaking of 1776, I'm sure most of you know that institutions all around the country are marking the 250 years since the Declaration of Independence and the birth of the United States, and the library is no exception. We are going to open multiple major exhibitions in this building starting in May, and there will be public programs and educational offerings, reading recommendations, and a whole lot more. So if this is of interest to you, please go to nypl.org/US250 to find out more, and as things develop, we'll be updating that page as well. When you walked in, you got programs and you got note cards in there. Those are for asking questions. Nina would love to take some of your questions at the end of the conversation. I very much encourage you to phrase your questions in the form of questions. And if you are watching... All right, didn't think it was going to land tonight. I'm glad it did. If you're watching online, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can email publicprograms@nypl.org, and we'd love to get them there as well. Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Isbahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and of course by all of you being here. Thank you very much for your support. And with that, please give it up for Jenny Boylan and Nina Sankovitch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to New York City Public Library. It is a delight to see you all, and it is my pleasure to be here with Nina Sankovitch to talk about Not Your Founding Father, an amazing story, and one that is of particular importance to us now here as we think about the 250th birthday of this country. There's so much to talk about, and I can't wait to get started, so let's do it. I guess the first question should be, how did you find this person?
This person. Universal Friend. Well, my last book, American Rebels, focused on the years leading up to the American Revolution and what inspired colonists to rise up against England. It was a pretty momentous decision to make, to decide, well, we're not going to be ruled by a king anymore. And part of my research focused on the role that ministers played in fomenting revolution. And ministers at the time in the colonies, especially the New England colonies, were very pro rising up against the king, very anti-king, except for I found this one minister who preached peace, not war. We should not be rising up. We should not be making war. We should be making peace. And I thought, who is this person? And then I found out this person was Universal Friend, who had been born a woman, but then in 1776 fell ill, almost died. I mean, the family was planning the funeral. Then one day, a few days into the illness, patient wakes up, bloom back on the cheek, the eyes are clear, I'm cured, I'm fine, but I am no longer Jemima Wilkinson. I am now a non-gendered messenger sent by God to save the world. Overnight, God came to me and said, I'm going to use your vessel and put in a spirit who's going to tell everybody in this dying and perishing world how to save themselves and how to find salvation, not only in the hereafter, but also how to be happy on earth. Universal Friend said, yeah, that's me, took up the mantle, and almost immediately began preaching to these, first just around the home, but then traveling out on a horse. As a girl, Jemima Wilkinson had been an amazing horsewoman, and now as a minister was just as daring. And went out on horseback, hair flying, and just began preaching. And it was a story that I just could not pass up. I had to find out more about this incredible minister.
Indeed. Indeed. And it's a remarkable story. It's a story that I had never heard before. Have we just been, well, I guess that's my question. How is it that the story has not been told? How is it that the friend... that friend was lost to us?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and there are lots of possible answers. One is that after a friend died, the sect didn't last too much longer, so you could say it was a flash in the pan. But as my book showed, it was actually an amazing sect that established communities in this country that were the first communities to live up to the ideals of the American Revolution. So it is a phenomenon we should know about. What's interesting is that among the sort of younger generation, people my kids' age, who are like in their 20s and 30s, they actually have heard of Public Universal Friend more than people my age. So it definitely in my history classes, and I was an American history major, I never heard about this minister. So it is interesting that there are people curious about outlier, non-conforming heroes, as if I could say, of our American history that we're only now really delving into and understanding, and there's openness to seeing that there are different. Why my book was called Not Your Founding Father is because there are different types of people who were very instrumental in creating the country that we have today, and that's why it's important that we're knowing that we are delving into this.
I want to set the stage for friends' earlier life. I want to talk about who they were before they became Universal Friend, Public Universal Friend, and I want to talk about what happened after the illumination and the founding of the sect. Can I say sect? That seems kind of judgmental, doesn't it? Sect.
Well, it's also a tough word. Sect is a tough word.
Yeah.
Sect. Religious society.
There's a religious community, even. Yeah, okay, that's better. But before we get to that, let's just talk about this moment in American history. Because, in fact, if Public Universal Friend had their conversion in, say, 1861, different story. If they had their conversion in 2004, very different story. But here's conversion happens October 9th, 1776. It's a moment when, well, I think I'm answering the question, aren't I? But let me pitch it at you. What is happening in this country? I mean, we all know it's the year of the revolution, but what does that mean? What does that mean for people personally and spiritually? What does that mean?
Yeah. So 1776, we're celebrating it. 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's what we're dating the birth of our nation back to. And the Declaration promised that that colonists who would fight for independence would be able to enjoy inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those words were no no just off-the-cuff remark. This was the culmination of really years of rhetoric that was used to foment revolution. This promise that we need to break free from the oppression of the English. We need to have freedom. We need to have the ability to determine for ourselves who we are and why we matter and how we will be governed. So there's all this rhetoric, and people are getting excited. And women colonists, female colonists, black colonists are saying, this sounds like something I could get behind. And Abigail Adams writes to her husband, John, in the spring of 1776 and says, make sure you remember, women are part of this too. Well, John Adams actually laughed about that and said, no, well, that's a good one, but I don't think so. But nevertheless, when the Declaration of Independence is signed, it really is like a covenant saying, you fight for us, you are going to enjoy these rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Keep that in mind, because those are three things that Universal Friend is going to deliver. But at the time that the Declaration is signed, Universal Friend is still a 23-year-old woman living in Rhode Island, a Quaker, who's being exposed to all of these ideas. Rhode Island was pretty much a hotbed of patriotism and of rebelling against King and England. So there's a lot of pamphlets that Universal Friend would have been exposed to. As a Quaker, Friend was very well educated. There was a library in her house. She would have read Thomas Paine's Common Sense, or certainly would have heard about it. Common Sense was America's first bestseller, so everybody pretty much knew about it. And Friend was also exploring new paths spiritually. She had broken with the Quakers and was going to these outlier sects, attending meetings, and seeing her faith, trying to find a new path forward for her spiritual life, but also, for Friend, it wasn't politics, but also, let's say, her social life, or how her world would be organized. Now, this was going on not only in Friend's life, but for all the colonists. All the colonists were experiencing this potential, this promise that things could be different. Just as things had changed with religion, where the Puritan minister no longer could just say to you, you're damned or you're not, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about your destiny. It's predestination. The colonists were saying, no, I'm going to make up my own mind about my faith, which is why all these outlier sects were doing pretty well in the years leading up to the Revolution. And they were also realizing we can decide what our political system is going to look like. So Friend falls ill, comes out, and is all of a sudden this minister preaching many of the same ideals, the ideals of equality and opportunity and self-determination. And the audience is receptive because they're hearing this from different variety of sources. But from Friend, there seems to be almost a connection that Friend makes with audiences where they see in Friend's promises a promise of the revolution, and what they don't know yet is that actually they're right to follow this minister. They're right that this minister is speaking the truth to them, because after the revolution, the promises made in the Declaration of Independence did not quite work out the way that leaders had been promising they would.
And so let's consider that moment in a second. But I just want to kind of acknowledge the fact that I don't know what your sense of American history is, but if I try to imagine the 1770s, if someone says to me, things were different in the 70s, I'm like, well, yeah, but those aren't the 70s I'm thinking of. The 18th century, to me, as an American, I had this sense of, Declaration of Independence. Okay, right. I know intellectually what came before that. But in terms of understanding the vibe in the air, like many of you, I watched the Ken Burns American History show recently, and that really, in many ways, opened up at least one way of looking at that time. But the thing that surprised me is how quickly this country went from wanting to mend things with a king that was still their king to the sense of revolution. And it happened fairly swiftly. And maybe it was because of a series of missteps by the king. Certainly it was. But it was also, I'm going to either suggest or ask, because something was in the air. Something. I mean, it all at once, there is the sense of possibility and the world really possibly being remade. So it's within that context that and Friend is not the only one. This is really not the story of just one person who goes crazy with some very lovely ideas.
Right.
It's a person who in many ways is reflecting their time.
Right. And there was a time of not only incredible aspirations and ambitions, but also fear. I mean, the colonists felt fear. What they were doing was momentous and scary. And to have someone say to them, but this is what you deserve. You deserve freedom. You deserve self-determination. You deserve equality. It helped them. It bucked them up. It gave them some certainty in very uncertain times.
So they're worried, among other things, if this is a moment when we can be free, what will it mean to live in a world without a king?
Which was huge. I mean, that was a huge.
Yeah, the idea of no kings, it's kind of a... Imagine if we could only capture that spirit now.
Yes. Well, and you spoke of some of the missteps. I mean, one of the big missteps of King and Parliament was sending troops to patrol cities that didn't want troops in their cities telling them what to do. So we see some other parallels as well.
That could really change people's opinion rather swiftly, couldn't it? And reveal a kind of vacuousness behind the king in a way. All right, so Jemima Wilkinson has lived her life up to this moment, gets sick, and is on the verge of dying. They're planning the funeral, and then wakes up rosy-cheeked, declares themselves the public universal friend, PUF, and begins to, let me get this, you said rides a horse around preaching the ministry.
Yes. Goes out.
And people don't say, this chick is crazy. People say, the friend has a good idea there.
Well, first they do say this chick is crazy, but you've got to go see this person. You've got to check this out, because not only does Friend have a compelling message, I mean, no one comes for the message at first. The reason people first come to hear Universal Friend preach is because the minister looks very different from anything they've ever seen before.
Okay, explain the difference. I mean, you can see the cover here. The cover is a painting painted late in the day. But how is Friend's appearance? Tell us what they look like.
So Friend wore their hair down, basically like mine, but more curly. Neither men nor women wore their hair down like this at that time. Men wore it back a little bit, wore a hat. Everyone wore a hat outside. Women always wore a hat. So Friend was not only bareheaded, wore hair loose, wore a cravat around the neck and a black robe. Sometimes wore some silk skirts under the black robe. But it was a look that was very ambiguous. Who are you? What are you? And so people came to see this person who went out bareheaded, except for when Friend, when it was cold, wore a beaver hat. And I did not know what a beaver hat was, so I had to look it up. It actually is like felted beaver fur. And Friend's actual hat can be seen if you go to Penn New York. There is a museum dedicated to Friend, and the actual hat is there.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing to see.
It was a very, there's a famous painting of Benjamin Franklin wearing the beaver, probably some of you know, wearing the beaver hat. And he wore it when he went to Paris because, again, he thought it was very American. It was very kind of wild, and it was all the rage. Yeah.
So Friend, originally, the first people came to see what Friend looked like, but then They stayed to hear what Friend had to say. And what the message they were getting was a message that you are all equal before God. There is no difference whether you are black or white, male or female. You are all the same before God. And God, you are all have an equal chance of achieving salvation. But not only that, you all can be happy now. You all have the opportunity to be happy now. You all have the opportunity to decide for yourselves how you're going to live your lives. So this was a very potent message in the times in which they were living. A Friend didn't write any sermons out. All of the preaching was done just off the top of the head. A Friend knew by heart the Bible, like whole text of the Bible, and would pick out a few lines and then preach based on that, the chosen text, but didn't keep any notes, didn't keep any, was not able to publish sermons. And this brings up, leads to a little problem Friend has later in the ministry when they try to pass off some written sermons as their own, and they were not. They were plagiarized. But that's because Friend never wrote any sermons down. Friend wrote a lot of things down, but not the sermons. And why did people come to hear these sermons delivered off the top of the head? Because this person had incredible charisma and delivered these sermons in a way that made them believe in the minister, but also in themselves.
What about, you said that everyone was welcome and everyone was equal. I have to ask, what about gay men, lesbians? Were we welcome as well?
Well, that's a good question. In the records, there's no record of what people were in terms of their sexuality. The records are single white woman, black woman, former slaves, so it's hard to determine what people's sexuality was. But there is no record of anyone being turned away or expelled from the society. Other religious societies had very strict rules of who got to stay and who had to be driven out. And in fact, the Quakers at the time were going through this major reform movement where they were kicking out a lot of people, including two of Friend's brothers, for fighting in the American Revolution because Quakers didn't allow fighting.
Right.
And one of Friend's sisters for having a baby out of wedlock.
Right.
But Friend did not expel anyone from the society.
And Friend themselves was
expelled for going to meetings of outlier sects. And this Quaker said, no, you can only come to our meetings. And Friend said, well, I'm interested in other meetings. And that was it. Friend was expelled from the Quakers.
Okay, so now who is drawn to Friend? Because as time goes on, Friend has a following, so much so that eventually Friend decides to establish a new community. So
right.
We should talk about that. But before that, again, who is drawn to Friend, and where are they from? Who are they?
That's also very interesting because many of these outlier sects attracted people who didn't have a lot of agency in their lives. Poor people, recent immigrants who had come to the United States. But Friend's followers tended to be well-established, even wealthy members of their communities who gave up a lot to join the society. Friend required that anyone who owned slaves had to manumit their slaves before they joined the society, which was, imagine if every minister in 18th century America had said, no one can have slaves, it would have been a very different story. We know the history of the United States would have been very different. So the people who came to Universal Friend came from, there were poor people who came, but there were very well-established people and also very middle-class people who came to join Universal Friend Society.
And we should, while I'm on that subject, we should probably just take a moment to talk about Friends. We use words like transgender at our own peril to describe people in the 18th century or any time other than our own. But is it wrong to call Friend trans? Would we think of Friend that way? How should we think of Friend? Because here's a person who declares they're free from gender.
Right.
Which, I mean, is not the way a lot of the trans people I know are binary trans people who are, who make a crossing. I mean, and I'll speak for myself. I consider myself a woman, not a woman with an asterisk, but a woman. And the older I get, the more like other women I feel like I am. But where do we fit friend into our sense of gender now here in the 21st century?
Well, friend really set eschewed. That's a hard word too. Eschewed, E-S-C-H-E.
You're good.
It's like that's a tough one. Identification as either male or female. There were some critics who said, people of our age, who said that Universal Friend was actually a misogynist because Universal Friend rejected females as having any power and took on the role of a man to have power. But that wasn't true. And that's not. Universal Friend did not want to be seen as male or female. Universal Friend made it very clear, I am neither male nor female, and asked that no pronoun at all be used for them.
At all.
At all. So I wrote this entire book without using a pronoun.
I know, that is amazing. And we're not talking about they, them. We're not talking about ze, them. We're talking about friend.
Yes. So in this conversation, I'm going to use the pronoun they because it would be incredibly awkward to have a whole conversation without using a pronoun for friend. So friend is definitely non-binary. If we go by the LGBTQ Foundation's definition of non-binary, and recognize themselves as non-binary, as neither male nor female, but as a messenger non-gendered messenger sent by God to save the world. And Friend truly believed it. This was not a fraud put out to gather followers. I mean, all sect records indicate that Friend believed it. A historian who wrote the first biography of Friend and who was actually able to interview living members of the sect and look at extensive records, also concluded Friend sincerely believed that God had come and said, you are a non-gendered messenger. Now, we may not believe that, but that doesn't matter. Friend believed it, and Friend held on to that belief for their entire life.
And is that sense that they are, or they were neither or both? Or both, neither, neither and both?
Yeah, that's actually a good question because there are reports of how Friend did like to wear, as I said, silk skirts. Do we see that as a feminine trait or a masculine trait? I don't know.
It depends what country you're in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, let's move the story forward just a little bit further. Eventually, there are enough followers, is that a good word to use? Followers, members of friends, friendship, fellowship, to want to establish a community. Can you tell us about that? Where did they go? What was the community like with it, and where was it, and what were the rules, if any?
Well, initially after the revolution, Friend and the Society of Universal Friends, which was the name the sect took, didn't really think about going and leaving sort of established communities in Pennsylvania is where they were kind of having their new. They had a headquarters in Rhode Island, but then gradually the headquarters sort of moved to Pennsylvania. But after the revolution, there came to be a lot of pushback against Universal Friend from established religious and political leaders. And it basically became very uncomfortable for the society to stay in the communities where they were. And they had already sort of been putting out feelers about going to the western frontier to have a safe place where they could establish real communities that lived by the ideals of equality, self-determination, liberty, freedom. See where I'm going with this? Pursuit of happiness. So they decided to go to Western New York, to the Finger Lakes area. And at the time, this was an area, well, for centuries, this had been an area that had been farmed and happily lived upon by Native Americans who were driven out of the area during the American Revolution by General Washington, upon General Washington's orders, as punishment for allying themselves with the British. So by the time Universal Friend and followers showed up in this area, there were some fruit trees remaining, a few houses remaining, but basically the area had reverted to wilderness, and they had to start from scratch to build this society, this community where everybody could come and live equally and have equal rights. It was very different from other sort of utopian communities of the times because, well, there was an expectation of faith and of following Universal Friend's teachings. There were really no other specific rules. Like if you lived with the Shakers, there were very specific rules about what you wore, what you ate, what you did, where you lived. The sexes were kept separate, absolute celibacy reigned, women did women's jobs, men did men's jobs in the Shaker communities. In Universal Friends communities, people could decide for themselves what they wanted to do. Now first, of course, they had to farm. Now as I said, a lot of these people had come from sort of well-established, hoity-toity backgrounds, and they did not know the first thing about farming, and they had a hard time. There are letters where they're saying, we need some advice on tomatoes. I mean, really, they really did not know what they were doing. So the first years were not easy ones. But they stayed there because of the opportunities that Friends Society, Friends Doctrine offered them. The opportunity to own their own land, make their own decisions, whether you were male, female, black, white, you could live there and have self-determination in a way that was not occurring anywhere else in the United States, in this new country of the United States. You want me to go into why that is, why that was, why we had this big back?
I think that would be a great question for you to ask yourself.
So this pendulum that had swung forward for revolution swung back after the revolution because people, there are a couple of reasons. One reason is people get nervous when change happens and they kind of revert to, well, how did we run things before? Should we go back to that? In terms of the political leaders, what they were facing in the United States was the problem of absolute lack of money. The United States was on the verge of collapse, and it had just become a country, but there was no money. There were huge war debts that had to be paid. There were bounties that had to be paid to soldiers. They'd been receiving paper promises of money. And what's interesting is that in the years after the revolution, the American former colonists were being taxed at much higher rates than they were taxed under the British. So some of them were thinking, what exactly did we fight for if we're even in more dire straits than we were before? So the ideals of religious freedom, economic freedom, voting rights, the abolition of slavery, all those things slid away. All those things were not important to the political leaders.
So we have Articles of Confederation for a few years, and it's not a strong system. We don't really know who we are. We're a collection of states. Okay, then we have a constitution. In 1788, we had the first president, and into the teens with Adams, Jefferson, Madison, we're still, we look back now and it's kind of the sense of, well, it was inevitable that, because that they would slowly grow stronger, and yet the original sin of slavery was going to take them down. And yet what was really going on is that people are still asking the question, what does it mean if we don't have a king, who are we? And so all of these questions, to some degrees, resonate with people who are drawn to Friend and who go to Seneca Falls and to this new community. This new community, which in the end doesn't really survive Friend, who dies in 1819. Can you tell us, in a way, it's not an atypical ending, but it's not exactly a happy ending for the community. Can you talk about where things wind up?
Yeah, but I just want to talk also about what things were like after the revolution and how we really don't talk about that or learn about that a lot when we learn American history. We certainly learn about all the years leading up to the Revolution, but sort of all the problems after the Revolution we don't really talk about. And one reason I wanted to tell the story of Universal Friend is to shed a light on what those years were like. By looking at Friend's life and experiences, we can understand what it was like for all Americans at that time. And certain things that happened to Universal Friend were experienced by all Americans, and how Friend reacted was obviously unique, but it does help us understand what life was like in that period, and also what it was like creating a country that had these great ideals. I mean, for example, in 1800, Friend was arrested by former followers. So once they got to this western area and created these communities that were very prosperous, other people also started to move west, and land values in the West rocketed. And that possibility of great wealth appealed to some followers of Universal Friend who had previously been very wealthy and maybe were missing their wealth and not enjoying being farmers. And they broke with Universal Friend, and that started the land wars, which eventually would lead to some problems for the society. But so these former followers arranged for Friend to get arrested for blasphemy. Court in upstate New York says, well, in this new country of the United States, is blasphemy even a crime? We have freedom of religion. Right. How can blasphemy be a crime? And they decide that, in fact, blasphemy is not a crime and Friend is free to go. And they say to Friend, do you have anything you want to share with us? And Universal Friend gives a nice sermon and then goes away, goes home. What's interesting that it was not until the 1920s that decision was upheld. So between 1800 and 1920, other cases of blasphemy were brought, and other courts said, we may have freedom of religion, but you can't say something bad about Christians. So there actually was not a recognition that of the freedom of religion and of blasphemy not being a crime until 1920s. So again, Friend's story is so illustrative of this conflict within our country of having these high ideals but not always living up to them.
Right. High ideals to which we do not quite live up to, which I'll just ask this directly. What then is the relevance to us of the story of the Universal Friend today?
For me, I think the story of Universal Friend, not to be completely corny, but it's inspiring. This was a person who came up with this idea of who they were and what they wanted to do. They wanted to help people escape damnation and find happiness on earth and in the hereafter. And Friend did not care what you looked like or where you came from, but you were there to be saved, and you were there to be helped, and you were there to be part of the community. So there was no judgment on where you came from, what color of your skin, what your origins were. There was an acceptance. There was a welcoming. There was you may be a stranger, but you are welcome in my community and I'm going to give you a chance to fulfill your potential. And it actually worked. Now, these land fights that arose in this society, Universal Friend did end up prevailing, but the emotional and monetary cost to the society was dire. And when Friend died, in the end, it proved to be just too much. That Friend's charisma held the society together, and once Friend was gone, the society began to fade away. Although its last member only died in the mid-1800s, and I believe that his great-great-granddaughter is in the audience. Yeah, back there. Hello.
There you are. Hi. Welcome.
So that was a young, and in 1800 he came to Henry Barnes came to live in Universal Friend's household, and stayed with Friend through. Eventually, he did get married. After Friend died, he got married and got his own household. But he was an amazing guy, and he was a maple tree tapper. And one day, he tapped 622 trees in one day. Can you believe that?
That's a lot of sap.
That's a lot of yeah. So it's just very exciting that that his descendant is here, and because he's quite a character.
We are just about to go to the audience, your questions. And as I move toward that, I just want to underline the thing that Friend said as they were waking from when they were leaving, in the fever. Yeah. Jemima, leaving her old self behind, woke up and said, "There is room
for everyone in heaven. Room for everyone in my community." And that was true. Friend made a promise and lived up to that promise.
There is room enough, which is a promise that is also resonates with the idea of in the Declaration of Independence, which is a promise which resonates. It's an idea that resonates with the promise of the Constitution, and
very relevant for where we are today.
That resonates with us now, as we. And in some ways, that's the fundamental question that we have never. We keep trying to answer it, and we never quite. For some reason, we have lacked the vision that Friend had, which is, in a way, it's not that complicated. There's room enough. There's room. And to this day, we're still struggling with the question of who there is room for. Right. Is there room for immigrants? Is there room for heretics? Is there room for people who are different? Is there room for transgender people? Is there room for non-binary people? Is there room for all of us to see each other as, friends, as each other's universal friend? I have some questions, and I'm just going to I'm not going to try to sort them out. So the first one here, this question is, what was your research process? Where did you find most of this information?
Well, I began researching this book in March of 2020. So not a good time to start researching a book. But what I found was that not only was I holed up at home, but all of the archivists and librarians who had collections that I wanted to see, they were also holed up, and they were actually quite willing to scan thousands of pages of documents and send them to me. So I was able to do an incredible amount of research that way, from home. Cornell University has the largest collection of the papers of Universal Friend, which makes sense because Friend's communities were in the Finger Lakes, which is right there where Cornell is. And then there were historical societies in Pennsylvania, New York, Rhode Island that had a lot of interesting papers as well. So that's where I did my research. And I am someone who is very old school. I keep notebooks and note cards, and that's how I do my research. And sometimes it can be frustrating to not find what I'm looking for, but then I'll find something I didn't know I was looking for, and it all works out.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question. Do you think that Friend was enlightened in a Buddhist sense? Did they ever act in ways that undermined their own preachings? It's really two different questions.
That is interesting. One of the texts that Universal Friend copied into their notebook. So Friend kept notebooks filled with quotes that the minister particularly liked, and included almost the full text of a book that came out that purported to be the writings of I believe of a Tibetan writer, a Tibetan faith healer or leader, and really wonderful maxims on how to live your life. And when I first discovered these writings, I thought Friend had come up with these amazing ideas. They're very like open to, we are here on earth to be happy. We are here on earth to help out. Like very basic, but very beautifully. And then I realized, no, these were these writings of a writer who pretended to be a Tibetan healer. So that's my not very good answer to that question. I'm not familiar enough with Buddhism to know whether Friend would align with Buddhist teachings, but Friend definitely was no saint. And as I said, there was one incident of plagiarism. So did Friend sometimes undermine their teachings? Possibly, but not in terms of really the love and care that the minister had for their community. And although there were people who complained that sometimes Friend could be a very fierce preacher, speaking of fire and brimstone, all members of the society also agreed that Friend was absolutely generous with time, with whatever resources they had to help the community survive.
Sorry, I'm just... you're really making the Friend come alive for me.
Oh, good.
And my first thought is just that this is just a person I wish I'd known.
Yeah, me too.
This is a very simple question. The Friend's life and career has many surprises. What surprised you the most?
What surprised me the most was how Friend established these communities, and I thought there would be a much more rigid structure imposed upon the communities. The first settlers of the communities did not include Friend. There was sort of this group that went first to just get things started, and then Friend was supposed to join them and almost died in an accident crossing a flooded river, horse and buggy, and almost drowned. So Friend was actually delayed a couple years from joining the settlement. And I thought, well, when Friend shows up, there's going to be this imposition of rules and order, but it wasn't like that. Instead, Friend showed up and said, you've done a good job, and we're going to make this even better. So again, this sense of not having to be the dictator, as so many, you read about so many people who manage society, like religious societies, tend to be very dictatorial about how things are run and who has to answer to whom. And Friend, came and really kind of went with things the way they were and worked with followers to make the community work.
Did Friend's followers have to leave their churches to join Friend's sect?
Well, they did because they joined the sect. I mean, I don't know if their own churches would. No, and their own churches wouldn't have. I mean, the Quakers very early on told people, don't go to these sermons given by this crazy person, which of course meant that a lot of people went to these sermons given by this crazy person, and many of the followers were former Quakers.
Well, that's also interesting that George Fox, of course, was a century earlier. George Fox, the founder of the Quaker movement, was that person who people were don't go following that George Fox because it's an evil sect. These Quakers. Yeah.
He interestingly also claimed to have undergone sort of this conversion where as he put it, he was back in the state before Adam and Eve. So the state before there was a separation, a recognition that men and women were different. So it's almost as if George Fox sort of was a premonition of Friend's conversion to I'm back before I've been converted to someone who's neither
universal
sex.
Gender.
Yeah.
This is really interesting. Were the men that we call the founding fathers aware of Friend?
I can't find any indication that they were, actually. I mean, some of the ministers of the time were, like Ezra Stiles, who was a president at Yale for a while and was a pretty prominent minister, was very aware of Universal Friend and actually had the minister to his house a number of times. But I can't find any recognition from any of the papers of John Hancock or John Adams or Abigail that they were aware of Universal Friend.
This is an interesting question. It says here, audience member notes, it's extraordinary that black people were welcomed to these meetings as equal members, and how was that possible?
Well, some of the black people who joined the society were actually former property of followers, and that when they were manumitted, they were like, well, this sounds like a pretty good society if they just encourage my manumission. So they came to society that way. And we don't know how many members of the society were indeed black, but we do have some indication that there were, and that within Universal Friend's household, there was a former enslaved person who lived the rest of her life with Universal Friend and just revered the minister.
I love this question. Did the friend awaken from the illness with new information, like, for instance, knowing the Bible by heart, that Jemima had not previously possessed? Like, could they speak Latin? Was there any?
No, there was no. Other than having seen God, Friend did not.
Which is not a small thing.
Which is no small thing. Friend already knew the Bible. As I said, just had so many parts of the Bible known by heart, but did not have some new knowledge of Latin or Greek or no. Great question, though.
This audience member is curious about the Universal Friends promoting and using masculine characteristics publicly to amass influence. Did their society promote women as leaders?
Yes. Universal Friend had women who acted not only as in religious roles in the community, so not only acted as sort of ministers as well and traveling ministers as well, but were involved in the administrative and financial aspects of the society, which was just unheard of. So even other societies that might, like the Quakers, allowed women to become what they called exhorters, which were ministers. So I think by the year 1800, half of the ministers in Philadelphia, Quaker ministers, were female, but they would not allow women to have administrative roles or handle the finances. But Universal Friend had women in these prominent roles from the very beginning.
That's just amazing. I'm going to ask you this last question, and then maybe we'll end with a short reading from you, if that's all right. This audience member asks, how did people in and out of the society react to the Friends' gender or genderless identity?
Well, people who were within the society had no problem or displayed no problem, expressed themselves as not having a problem with viewing Friend as genderless. Now, people outside of the society had a problem with it and were either very critical or there's an example of a French count who was exiled from France because this was the period of the French Revolution, who commented that she was quite a beauty and sent her presents and basically tried to woo her. So that was an interesting way to view the Friend. Followers who broke with
something very Pepe Le Pew about it, I must say.
Well, I think it was my imitation. But
the Friend has a painted stripe down the back.
Former followers who broke with Universal Friend. Very interesting that while they were loyal to Friend, they had no trouble, not using a pronoun and always referring to Friend by either Universal Friend or devoted minister or best friend. Those are all the words that they used for their minister. After they broke with Friend, called Universal Friend a deluded woman.
Ooh.
And regretted ever having followed a deluded woman. So that was pretty bad.
Oh.
That was pretty petty.
Sorry, we're ending there. Would you read a last?
Do you want me to do the last?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just have a sip of water quickly. Okay, this is from after Friend has died.
Here, let me hold your mic just while you get that straightened out. Okay.
For almost half a century, Universal Friend provided a light of hope when many found themselves in darkness, and reassure them not only of the possibility of eternal salvation, but also of happiness now, here on earth. The message, which Friend believed came directly from God to be conveyed to a lost and dying world, had been delivered. A message of repentance and salvation for the times in which Friend lived, but even more, a message of resilience and courage, and of resistance and perseverance for all times. The messenger had been called back, but the message would live on.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to have a book signing up here. I'm sure that Nina would be delighted to sign a book for you and to tell you briefly more about Universal Friend. Thanks for coming to the library. Peace and love.